Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends and community. This is your host, Erin Bradley. Thanks for being with us today. I am quite thrilled, actually, because we've got an encore appearance from my buddy Jay Pap-uh-zan. And if you're not familiar, you should probably just stop listening to the podcast and go get his books and start listening to his podcast because he's really the OG of the wisdom in the real estate space that I've been learning from and following and admiring for many, many years. So Jay's been with Keller Williams for a long time. He'll be sharing his story with that organization. He's also a best-selling author of some of my favorite books, like The One Thing and The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. He's the host of the One Thing podcast, and he's an incredible human being, friend, influencer in the real estate space, and really just somebody that we can all learn from and look up to. So with no further ado, Jay, thanks for being with us today again. I'm so glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. And like I said, we kind of mutually stalk each other online to keep track of each other. So, yay, we actually get to chat.
I know it's like sort of in real life. It's closer than just, following pages on Instagram. But Jay, for anyone who's not met you before or been consuming your content, give us a little bit of the backstory and kind of lead us to where we are today. Because the last time we had you on the show was before another significant market shift, and we've both been in the industry through previous ones, and how that led you to writing the book Shift and all the other things we discussed on the last appearance on the show. So just give us bring us up to speed. How did you get into the space? How did you get to where you are today? And we'll go from there.
There's two halves to my lives. We'll skip the first part, growing up and being a bookish kid. But right before I was 30, I met and married my wife, Wendy, who is my co-founder in many businesses. And you know her well. She's a real estate entrepreneur as well. And I started working for Gary Keller. We moved to Texas and I started a publishing operation with him. So we've published six best-selling books together. Started with The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, and then the last one, big one we wrote together was The One Thing. And we now co-own several businesses. And it's really weird to say this out loud. I've worked at Keller Williams as an employee, even though I've been doing the real estate freedom thing, right? We've bought real estate properties. We have enough cash flow to cover our income. We've done all the freedom stuff and we own businesses, but I'm still an employee. So 24 and a half years. But I've had the privilege of working since 2002, June of 2002, kind of directly with the founder and kind of a self-made billionaire. It's not like in Forbes or anything, but most people kind of assume that if you were to sell this beast of a company, he'd probably walk away with something like that. So it's kind of cool to see someone with a $60,000 loan started the largest real estate company under one brand in the world. So I'll stick around a little while longer.
It's pretty cool. And it's
Yeah.
pretty cool that you've developed all this side by side, and also impressive and a testament to, I think, the personalities of both of you to stay in partnership, to navigate the highs and the lows, because let's be real.
Bands break up all the time. And yeah, no, I love that you acknowledge that. I worked in publishing before this at HarperCollins. And so, like, there are dynamic duos that are out there rarely. I think about Chip and Dan Heath, and I get to interview, I think, Chip Heath in a couple of weeks. And I'm not going to do it on stage, but I'm like, why don't you and Dan write books together anymore? I'm such a big fan. But they're two brothers, and now they're kind of doing their own solo careers. So we'll see. But Gary and I have a good partnership. I think we make each other smarter and sharper. He's a career real estate guy. I came into it sideways and fell in love with it. And I just bring a different perspective. We have different perspectives, and together they make them stronger.
I love that. Well, I feel like we should just jump kind of into a little bit of the hot topic because, like I said, the last time we had you on the show, you and we unpacked, the 2008, 2009, and how you and Gary had actually been planning to write a different book. And then we talked about the book Shift, which in the
Yeah.
past 2 to 3 years, actually probably the past 4 years, I basically required some of my team members in 2021 to read that book again if they hadn't read it yet, because I could see the writing on the wall. And now, 4 years later, we know that we've all been navigating this. So I'm curious what the story has looked like in your life at Keller Williams, in the conversations you've had with agents, and even we'll move into the 20 percenter here in a little bit. But
Yeah. Well, some of the stats that came out, like I think Redfin stat were quantitatively in terms of real estate sales last year, 2024 was the worst year since 1995. Transactions is not the whole story. People generally get paid on volume, and that's a general thing. I almost feel like with all the lawsuits, I have to put a caveat on that, but you know what I mean. There is maybe a little bit more potential commission and fees available for folks out there because home prices have gone up. It's still pretty tough. I did not see the real estate industry get that much smaller. So they did dip and then they grew towards the end of the year. So I think we only net lost 30,000 realtors last year, and we're at like 1.4 million. You know, whatever that number is, 1.3, 1.4 million, and we only had 4.1 million home sales. There's not a lot of transactions to go around. Redfin posted a stat, I think last week, that said 71% of the realtors, and they're only in certain markets, so they can't see everything. 71% did not sell a single home last year. So it kind of shows you the short tail, not the long tail of real estate. Like things are incredibly concentrated. There are those who are full-time professional real estate advisors and agents. And then there's a lot of people that are very part-time or are so new, they haven't yet earned the book of business in a tough market. I know that it can take people a while to build that pipeline, and there's a lot of new agents out there, but man, it's very competitive market. If you look at it in the total volume available, I think it was the fourth best year on record, but it's the worst in terms of sales, like unit sales, since 1995. So I just dumped a lot at you. Basically, Shift's a great book to be reading right now because you need to be very strategic if you want to get your unfair share of the market today.
I was actually quoting you one day, I think something you shared online about your outcome is not the issue, it's your execution. And, I'm a huge fan of Shift because it highlights how people became resilient in a difficult or more challenging market or more competitive market, right? And what it looks like to understand your recipe and your metrics, and then when you need to level up on execution because you're not getting as many leads or transactions from what used to work. I'm curious, how do you see it any different or the same from that last time around? Because it's one of my favorite things is saying, okay, well, what's the difference between this gal over here who just had one of her best years ever and did 23 million in volume, and then the ones over here who haven't sold a single home? And I find a lot of times it comes down to that decisiveness, the mindset, and then the execution. But I'm curious what your perspective is.
I would generally agree with you. I think that there are core non-negotiable activities that if you're going to be a professional, it's a job and you need to just do them. So, I mean, lead generation is first and foremost. However, you acquire your business, you're going to probably have to amplify what you were doing multiple times to compensate for a slower market. I actually was trying to, the economist in our company reports to me. So I can nerd out on this, but I actually have a nerd that reports to me, like a bona fide PhD nerd, right? And it's great because I can just bounce these crazy questions off of them. But when I look, the last time sales were like this was 2008, and they were higher in 2008, which was the bottom of the Great Recession. They were actually higher than they were last year in terms of home sales. And then you go back to 1995. I kind of feel like this is the bottom. And why I say that is you and I both know there are economic reasons that people sell their home, people building wealth, they're investors. A large percentage of all home transactions are driven by life events, death, divorce. Are you having a baby? Are you getting deployed? Are you getting laid off? Like all of the things that happen in life. There's, I think, 7 Ds somewhere. I even wrote about it, but I don't have them memorized. Then you've got investors, but there are people who will buy and sell in the market, and you have to be that much more aggressive to be the one that they're talking to. And I think those are the people that are being successful. And there are a handful of pockets. There's always local markets that are kind of booming. The
Yeah.
national average does not reflect your neighborhood or your zone. Like right now, I think a hotspot's kind of luxury. Like when we look at our luxury numbers, if you're doing the job, I think some luxury agents are doing okay because those homes are discounted a little bit.
Mhm.
And a lot of their buyers are cash buyers. So the mortgage rates don't matter. I agree with you. You need to do the non negotiables to earn the right to be called a professional in this business. Otherwise, you're just an amateur with a professional's license. The odds would say Redfin might tell us that 71% are kind of amateurs.
So one of the things that I wanted to dig into, because again, it's talking about nerds. I could nerd out on this stuff all day, but I saw something that you were sharing on your Instagram at one point about these topics of goal drift
Yeah.
and unconscious quitting.
Yeah.
And I got the feeling that if I could hear it from you, it's going to be something else that I find myself quoting about you. You know, your ripple effect goes wide and far, Jay, because the impact you have on people's lives without even realizing it is so much greater than you probably even know. And I find myself hearing you say something or reading something from your book that just strikes me in the exact right moment. And so I thought somebody listening needs to hear about this. So let's talk a little bit about the goal drift and what that is and unconscious quitting.
It's in one of my last two podcast episodes. So I think you saw a reel that the team cut from that. I wanted to do the Valentine's Day conversation. And so to be cute, it's called having a relationship with your goals. Maybe, gosh, 7 years ago, I was teaching a class with my co-founder of the One Thing training business, not Gary, the my co-founder of the other business. Jeff and I were teaching, and he was talking about how billionaires set goals because we were kind of using Gary as a method for like, here's how billionaires set goals, which is a very catchy title. So hats off, Jeff. And I just kind of thought like, but the world doesn't need a new way to set goals. Everybody knows how to set goals. What we don't know how to do is actually have an ongoing relationship with them. And the point was, it's like if you were falling in love, if we can all remember back to the last time that happened to us, when you're falling in love with someone, you don't want to say goodnight without knowing when you're going to see them again. Are we going to go out tomorrow night? Are we going to go out Saturday night? Like you want to have dates with your honey. You want to talk to them on the phone. I can remember like I was dating my wife when email was kind of a new thing. So we were sending romantic emails to each other during the workday, just thinking about you, whatever. And when she's got a little box of them, back in the day, it would have been letters, I'm sure. But like you want to engage on a regular basis with the people that you care about. And I think if most of us posted our relationship with our goals to Facebook, what do you think it would be? It's complicated, probably, right?
Yeah.
Because you start the year and all these people are setting New Year's resolutions and goals. Statistically speaking, most people will have already given up on their New Year's resolution by next week. That's how fast it happens. Maybe they're just having a summer romance. It's not a relationship. I think about a relationship with your goals is like have regular meetings with it. So we teach in our company, we call it a 411. And it's a long back that way to say on one piece of paper, you have your annual goals. Every month, you say, based on what I want to do this year, what am I going to do this month? And then below that, you'll say, based on what I'm going to do this month, what am I going to do this week? And so it's a way for you to back down from your annual goal, what your milestones are for each month and each week, so that you look up this week and say, what do I need to do? It should be really clear and it should be directed towards your outcomes. If you only do that at the beginning of the year, like from a navigation standpoint, you could be anywhere in the world by the end of the year. But if
Yeah.
every week you're checking in, well, how did I do last month? And based on that, what do I have to do this month? Do I need to change? Like you're every week, 52 times going on a date with your goals. That's when we get into this idea of goal drift. When people just have a number that's for the end of the year up on the board, maybe their mirror, I'm going to be number one in my market or whatever that is. If they're not checking in and measuring their gains and their gaps, right? I like the whole gain conversation more than the gap from a mental standpoint. Like, how far did I go this month? And therefore, how far do I have to go this month to stay on track? They could be anywhere. They could be drifting in the wrong direction and not know it because they're not checking in.
Yeah. When I look back, I find that I can get the clarity to see, okay, I did it again. I overcommitted without discernment. I said yes to too many things without realizing that that's not actually in alignment with my goal at all. And it's that course correction. It's not being frustrated that you're not there yet, which is the gap piece, but it's more about recognizing where you can see the correlation between, okay, well, look, I did this, this, and this outcome came, and I couldn't have even scripted that outcome exactly, but I can see how there's a correlation between, 2 + 3 = 5. And I like that.
You
What
remember
is it?
MapQuest?
Yeah.
Do you remember, like, there used to be a time where you'd go online and you would print out the map.
Yeah.
And if you were driving from a city to another city or something, you'd kind of think like, okay, I'm going to go from Austin to Gonzales and then from Gonzales to this town. And you'd just be looking for the next sign. We didn't have real-time GPS just kind of passively telling us exactly where we were every second of the day. You
Yep.
actually had to think about it. You had to navigate or you got lost. And I think that's the kind of same thing here. That's what we mean by drift. If you're not checking in and plotting it a little bit, you can go in the wrong direction. The other thing that happens is like you end up next year and it's like a merry-go-round because most of the people probably listening to your podcast are like ours. They're doers who don't really leave a lot of space to dream.
Yep.
And so they're working in their business, but they're not stepping out and working on it, right?
Hmm.
And so they're really good at taking a lot of action, but they may be paddling so hard, but then they look up in January of next year and they're kind of in the same place. The merry-go-round's right back where it started. And a lot of people are kind of groundhog daying their years and they're getting stuff done. It's just not the stuff they intend to get done.
Well, I think that kind of leads us nicely into, I'd love for you to share the kind of message behind the one thing, because if I try to reiterate it, I'm sure that I'll just butcher it. But what I like about the one thing is that, as someone who used to joke that my superpower is to create space and then fill it till it overflows, the one thing was really, I think it was written for me. Like, all right, pump the brakes, Erin, pump the brakes, and let's get some clarity. And that's why I love the word discernment. One of my affirmations when I needed to create some change within my habits was, I have all the time I need to accomplish what matters most. And the key word there is what matters most. And so, what is it that you guys teach in your coaching community and through your book around the one thing? Because it'll sound more eloquent coming from the actual author.
I want to say there's a meme. It's maybe you've seen it. Adulthood is saying, but after this week, things will slow down a bit until you die.
Yes.
And so
Yep.
I love that line. And I also know there is a psychological phenomenon that we always believe we'll have more time in the future than we have today. So one of the reasons we make commitments in the future is that there is this weird kind of internal bias that makes us believe that we'll actually be less busy in the future. So, like your little story about yourself, just realize you're everybody. Everybody does this. We overcommit into the future, not realizing that 3 weeks from now is going to look a lot like this week.
Totally.
And we also vastly underestimate the scope of the commitments we do commit to. So, like you say, great, let's meet, but that meeting could turn into 5 meetings, right? And we just don't know. So, it's like the whole point of the one thing to answer your question is knowing those things to be true. How do we identify the things that actually matter so that our yeses are given with more confidence and less clutter? And we're also empowered to say no. My coaches kind of taught me we are going to disappoint people if we're going to be successful. We're probably going to disappoint ourselves and people if we're not going to be successful. Are we disappointing the right people?
I
And
love
that's
that.
hard if you're a parent to hear sometimes. But we look up and we're like, if I'm going to disappoint people, some of what I've got to do is have real clarity around my priorities so that I'm not saying yes to going to Key West when I should be attending my kid's soccer game. And it takes a simple process. The subtitle is The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results. It is simple, it's just not easy. It means that you kind of constantly have to defend your focus. Steve Jobs said that every yes has to be defended by 1,000 no's. And I think
Mm.
he might have been underestimating it. The point of the book is to help get people get really clear about what matters to them so that they can identify their real priorities. And we kind of define being productive as working on your priorities. So, like, there's a pyramid towards the back, it's like an iceberg. And you know how most of the iceberg's below the surface. Above the surface on the little iceberg is this idea of productivity. We see productive people and we say, man, that Erin just gets shit done. Pardon for the cussing, but like, man, she knows how to get it done. She's so productive. What we don't see is under the surface. And in all of our
Mm.
research that we did, and it's not just our experience, we spent 4.5 years working on this book. Purpose is the foundation. Purpose is a heavy word. They have a clear sense of their core values. They have a notion of who they're trying to become and where they want to go in life. And based on that, I am on a journey to becoming this thing. And if it was, again, the road analogy, I'm traveling from Austin to South Padre National Seashore. That's pretty much due south from where I live. If I want to travel 8 hours due south, I may not know everything about the way, but I know what direction to go. So everything that's not south should be a no to me if that's really important to me, right? It's kind of like when I said I do to Wendy, I knew it was a default no to everybody else. So some yeses are bigger than others, and we're trying to give people that sense. So that's that values driven, purpose driven. This is where I want to go. When people know that, their priorities become clear. And when people act on their priorities, they're productive. So that's kind of the big idea behind the book. And we try to keep it simple. But I think a lot of people, if you ask them, say, do you know what your one thing is for being a good parent or for doing your job? I thought they wouldn't know the answer. But the reality is, most people do, but they're so busy, they're just not asking the question. They're just racing right past the answer every day and then looking up and feeling periodically guilty.
So let's talk about this because you and I both have this goal achiever personality, and we like the systems and the strategy and the measurement and the understanding the priorities. And you alluded to one of my favorite books. I love all of Benjamin Hardy's books, but The Gap and the Gain. And it's something that I've been exploring in recent years. And I'm curious if you and Wendy have as well, where how do we find that balance between here's my purpose, here's the goal, here's the priorities, and the productivity is executing on my priorities so that I'm on my way to fulfilling this purpose. And then how do you guys approach the concept of what does it mean to be in the gain, and what does it mean for you to have those crystal clear priorities and goals, and then we're going to back the action plan into, okay, we want to be here in a month or in 12 months, then we need to be here doing this in the next month, and this is this week. And, what does it mean to come up for air and also be in the moment as we're
Yeah.
unfolding towards those destinations?
So I don't want to make it sound like it's over engineered. I think it's a process working backwards from a goal, right? It's just something we're not taught, but it is a muscle that gets strong really fast. So a little bit of practice, and we see our students in our group coaching and our coaching, they start to get it pretty quickly, even if it's very awkward at first, like most things. The thing that we have to get people not to do, like one of the things we say is if it's important to you, make an appointment with yourself to do it. We call it time blocking. And our super, ambitious folks will look up and they'll have 8 hours a day time blocked. And that's just not realistic at all. Maybe your morning, what is the critical thing that you need to do each day? And there's usually not more than a couple of other ones that actually matter. And the rest of your day, you can actually be a little looser. Like Gary tends to be fairly undisciplined in the afternoons. And people will come in to shadow us or whatever. And if they see us after the writing session or at the end of the writing session, they're like, how do these jokers ever get anything done?
Guilty, me too.
Because we kind of front load the important stuff.
Yes.
I don't know how that connects to being present all the time. I just know that if you're too busy, you're kind of avoiding something. People
Mm-hmm.
who fill up their calendars are hiding from something, because it's easy to say, look at everything I'm doing. And it's kind of like, look over here, don't see what I'm not doing. In my coaching, my experience, really busy people are hiding. So that immediately throws up a flag for me. I need to ask a lot of questions and see, Great coaches go where you're hiding. Where do we need to go and unpack this together? The other part, and I'm not going to go deep, this could get in the weeds, but a lot of top achievers, if we talk to our kids the way that we talk to ourselves, they would take our kids away from us. And so my coach would sometimes reminds me, you need to embrace your inner coach, not your inner critic. And that's a longer journey, a little self-compassion, a little grace, asking questions. How do I feel about that? How could I do better tomorrow versus I suck today? I love The Gap and the Gain. That's actually my favorite of all of their books because it illustrated what I see so often in top achievers, and they get caught in the trap of moving the goalpost on themselves. And because they're always focused on the gap, they'll only be looking at the negative and they never look over the shoulder and see how far they've gone. So they do these two things, even if they get to the finish line. So there's no gap. The very first thing they do is they have to make it bigger. Well, now that I've done a marathon, I should do an ultra marathon, or maybe I should do back-to-back marathons. Like it always has to be bigger. And so they're always going to be creating a gap and then they stay unnecessarily focused. So that was just a great framework. And
Yeah.
it's so
I,
easy with your kids or your spouse. And sometimes if you can embrace your inner coach to just periodically journal, because the first thing we teach our people to do is look back. How did we do last week? Let's look at the gain before we look at the gap.
it's just interesting because something clicked within me when I read that book and something evolved that is part of why I asked the question and something that I've been exploring in regards to this concept of previously feeling like the goalpost kept moving and I kept moving, it's like now I'm on my way to that and then I'm on my way to that. And it's like we're always on our way to something. We're always on the leading edge of the new desire that's unfolding. And that's a beautiful thing. But also, as I started to look back to see the gains, what started to surprise me was how many incredible opportunities, conversations, new relationships, clients, things like this were not scripted by me, the goal achiever.
Yeah.
Meaning, I could set a goal on January 1st and I'm going to have this many clients and I'm going to do this much activity and all these things. And then I'm looking back on December 31st, acknowledging that I had nothing to do with half of the synchronicities that unfolded.
Yeah.
Like I had a clear vision on that destination, but and you mentioned Steve Jobs earlier because he said that you can't connect all the dots looking forward. So you just have to start taking action and then be able to look back at how the dots connected. It's just a topic that I've been pondering and exploring because nowadays, instead of setting the goal and then being frustrated in the gap between where I am and where I want to be, I'm more curious and sort of, I don't know, eagerly anticipating the unfolding between here and there because there's going to be so much that's unscripted.
Yeah.
And if you're allowing it, it kind of unfolds. I almost feel like it can create some momentum if you get a little more curious instead of so strategic. But it's that fine line. I think Hal Elrod said on his podcast once this dance between, ambition to the point of out of alignment versus contentment and satisfaction to the threat of complacency or laziness, right? So like how do we dance in the middle of I'm so excited about where I'm going, but I don't need to be frustrated that I'm not there yet because I'm always going to be excited about where I'm going next.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I don't meet them often, but the happiest achievers I know are the ones that use the word, they're fundamentally curious about their own potential. And that's different than being driven, but they're really curious, like what am I capable of? And they're
Yeah.
exploring and they're experimenting with it, but that's just a different attitude. Gary has become that way more and more the longer I've known him. He's just asking what's possible. And he's coming at it with this kind of wonder and curiosity versus, I don't know, some parent or teacher or relationship in our past cracking a whip in our ear, might be saying, you're not good enough until you. I think a
Yes.
lot of people, I'll be happy when. And that's why the goalposts always move because you're never happy when. You're happy when you decide to be happy, when you accept who you are. So, like, we're getting kind of zen here, but it's probably what a lot of people need I love that that's the headspace you're in,
Well, I
right?
heard something recently around like if we could get more people to linger in the wonder if space. So we hear a lot of people, specifically in the last few years, and I don't know where I heard this, but defending their limitations of their mind, right? So we look externally at the market and the rates, and so we say, I can't because, and whatever follows is the defending of the fear of why we think we can't, right?
I think it's a zig. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them.
Yeah. And then it's like, I wish I could, but, and whatever follows but is fear as well, right?
Yeah.
And and then, like what does it look like to move on that continuum from I can't to, well, I wonder if I could. And to your point, I think curiosity around the human potential is an interesting topic because we can all go back to our 20-year-old self and see that we have greatly exceeded the expectation or the belief of that 20-year-old person in some area of our life, health, relationships, financial, marriage, kids, whatever. So it's like proof that we're on the leading edge of our full potential and we've probably only scratched the surface. And I
Yeah.
think curiosity can be more interesting than forcing ourselves to achieve it and to give ourselves permission to feel fulfilled.
Yes, 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 yes. Like everything you just said. Like you're just like we're gonna have a little chorus here. I also think my coach asked me, what is it that you want to most remember about this season? Like when
Mm.
you go out 2 years from now and you're looking back, what do you most want to remember? And that little exercise kind of got me thinking. If I ask people, what were your highlights from last year? Most people can rattle off a few things. But if I say, what were your highlights from the year before last? There's usually only one or two big milestones that anybody remembers. They remembered a baby being born, right? A friend moving to town, maybe a once in a lifetime trip, losing a job, getting a job. Like they're big milestones. And I just think so much of what we kind of get in a state about won't actually matter at all. And it doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. Don't get me wrong. Like I like to be in action. I want to be doing these things, but the stakes aren't nearly as high as we think. And that comes back to where we started. Like what actually matters? Are we hiding from things by doing all of this stuff? Because sometimes like it's easier to just be busy than to stop and try and maybe fail for a while at the thing that really does matter. We just have to ask that question of ourselves or have a good accountability partner that can help us see maybe we're missing an opportunity to slow down and maybe fail for a while at something that matters a lot more to succeed at over time.
Well, Jay, as you know, we could go on for hours on this existential journey
Yeah,
and
yeah.
goal achieving, but I do want to respect your time. And I'm curious, nowadays, where are you most present? I mean, if folks want to listen to your podcast, follow you on Instagram, or learn about your coaching programs, share all the things, and we'll make sure those links end up in the show notes.
Well, most of the stuff that I'm focused on today is at the1thing.com with the number one, the number one thing.com. So I'm the host of the podcast. I'd never done it. We're at, 495 episodes, I think. And I just started in November. And I'm so happy I took that job on. That's where I love to live. And so I also am leading our group coaching. I'm not doing one-on-one, but I do our group coaching cohorts. So those are two places. But like you were mentioning it earlier, I write a weekly newsletter called the 20 Percenter. And if you type any version of the 20 Percenter in my name, you're probably going to find it. But Friday mornings at 7 a.m., you get to peek between my ears on what's on my brain that week. And I just try to make it helpful. I think of it probably the people who listen to your podcast, people who are striving, that are doing, they're leaders, they're trying to lead themselves. Got a little soft spot in my heart for real estate and real estate investing, obviously, because that's the background I come from. But those are kind of the themes, and it's whatever was kind of speaking to me loudest that week is going to show up on Friday at 7 a.m.
Perfect. I love it. It's like taking this podcast conversation and turning it into, it's like this is what's on my mind now. So I'm going to go
Yeah,
talk about this.
it happens a lot, actually. You
I
never
love
know what's
that.
going to spark that thing that you just like, you know what, I need to go write that down.
Well, and I love that you're podcasting now because now it's been so many years that I've been doing this show. And I find it to be so interesting and energizing to connect with people that are thinking at a deeper level and are bringing value to the world like you are. Because again, I always leave with some nugget that becomes something that I'm now pondering and processing in the weeks to come, or maybe something I can pass that baton on in a future conversation with someone. So I really appreciate you taking the time from your schedule and joining us today, Jay. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
And to all my friends out there at Pursuing Freedom, thank you as always for tuning in. And I always implore you, if you haven't left a review that you love this content, please be sure to do so. It helps us continue to attract these amazing guests like Jay and help this content get found so more people can get on into the journey of building a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you. And we'll see you next time.